1.5 DC, K9 K90 horsepower, 110 horsepower, 116 horsepower. Let's talk about engines. 95% of all fitted Megane 4 are equipped with a 1.5-liter cast-iron turbodiesel. This is a motor from the mid-2000s, with a cast-iron cylinder block. The engine is excellent in every sense, easily runs 500,000 kilometers and even more. There are versions without the AdBlue system, but most with urea injection. The filler neck for this liquid is located next to the tank neck, i.e. under the common hatch. The AdBlue injection can be removed without any problems, because there are often problems with the supply module and its tank. The 1.5-liter turbodiesel under the hood of the Megane 4 worries about little things. Keep an eye on the thermostat gasket. You may need to replace burnt tubes to the pressure sensor in front of the particulate filter and replace the air temperature sensor in front of the turbine. Errors in the flow meter usually indicate that somewhere in the intake tract the seals between the pipes are leaking. Often the sealing ring between the damper and the plastic pipe breaks. This valve, also known as the throttle, is located opposite the brake fluid reservoir. The EGR valve is also here. Believe it or not, it doesn't particularly bother owners of new Renaults with this engine. It is simply removed and cleaned for your own peace of mind. The Siemens fuel system of this engine has been studied inside and out. Craftsmen almost revived the injectors by completely disassembling and cleaning. People know that the fuel injection pump has a conical metal filter, cleaning which also allows you to get rid of many problems with injection. By the way, about the inserts. New owners of Megane 4 with this engine continue to change the connecting rod bearings. There have been no cases of them turning, but by the time they reach 200,000 kilometers, they are pretty worn out. Considering that new original 1215089110R earbuds cost about $90, and really good analogs are 2 to 4 times cheaper, preventive replacement is inexpensive. You just need to remove the pan, and then tighten the connecting rod screws with the correct force. We advise you to open the oil pump and inspect its rotor blades. They often have quite a lot of wear at their base. 1.6 DC, or 9M 130, 165 horsepower. Less often they bring Renault Megane 4 with a 1.6-liter 1.6 DC turbodiesel. This is a more modern engine, with an aluminum cylinder block and a timing chain drive. It drives more vigorously and is a little more expensive to maintain. We cannot fail to mention that the aluminum blocks of these engines, especially the 165 horsepower Biturbo version, tend to crack. This very often happened not on Meganes, but on larger Renaults such as Espace and Master. The cylinder blocks were replaced under warranty, but they started doing this on cars in 2019 and later. Release. Therefore, if you like a Megane 4 with a 1.6 DC engine, freshly fitted, then it's worth finding its service history in Europe. Perhaps the short block was replaced in 2019. By the way, the reinforced 1.6 DC engine block with one turbine has a number starting with the symbols E4E4, and for the Biturbo version, E4D4. The main sign of a cracked cylinder block is antifreeze getting into the oil. It flows directly into the pan, and a crack forms along the support of the second journal of the crankshaft. Even when operating the 1.6 DC engine, you should listen to the rustling of the timing chain and be ready to replace the lambda probes. In the Biturbo version, keep an eye on the EGR cooler. It bursts and allows exhaust gases to escape. Its body smokes with soot along the crack, and the smell of untreated diesel exhaust penetrates into the interior. It happens that the cooler cracks so much that it leaks antifreeze out. There have been cases where, during a long highway drive, the antifreeze leaked out almost completely, and the engine jammed with the connecting rods breaking. The original EGR cooler, 147357086R, costs about $350 today. 1.7 DC, or 9N 120 horsepower, 150 horsepower. Since 2018, a new turbodiesel with a displacement of 1.7 liters has been installed on the Megane 4. Sometimes the designation 1.8 Blue DCI is found. It is rare and so far no problems have been noticed with it. This motor is a development of the 1.6 DC engine. The petrol engines available for the Megane 4 are all downsizing and turbocharged. They were installed on Nissan under different designations. They do not have hydraulic compensators. 1.2 Terrace, H5 FT 100 horsepower, 130 horsepower. The main gasoline engine before restyling is a 1.2-liter 4-cylinder engine. It has been released since 2012. It performed well. There were problems with the timing chain tensioner, which were corrected under warranty. Even long European service intervals easily bring this engine to the point where the piston rings are stuck. The risk of oil leakage is very high. 1.6 Terrace GT, M5 MT 205 horsepower, 1.8 RS, M5 PT 280 horsepower, 300 horsepower. Other Megane 4 before restyling are the charged version of the GT and the highly accelerated racing RS Trophy. The engines are not bad, they do not fall apart. However, timing chains last 100,000 kilometers, and the problem of oil consumption is still relevant. 1.0 Terrace H5 DT 115 horsepower, 1.3 Terrace H5 HT 102 horsepower, 115 horsepower, 140 horsepower, 160 horsepower. After the restyling that took place in the 2020 model year, new base gasoline engines with a displacement of 1 and 1.3 liters appeared. These engines have hydraulic compensators in the valve drive. According to reviews, these engines do not cause any serious problems so far. 1.6 PHEV, H4M 158 horsepower. Even after restyling, a plug-in hybrid appeared. Its power plant uses the old naturally aspirated H4M. Manual transmissions on the Renault Megane 4 are reliable and durable, and all automatic versions are equipped only with robotic transmissions. They all feature dual-mass flywheels, which range in price from $450 to $900. TCe 6-speed robot. The 1.5-liter diesel engine was equipped with a robot from Getrag with a dry clutch. This is a robot in the classical sense, a mechanical transmission with servo drives for gear shift forks and clutch. By the way, they started installing it in tandem with this turbo diesel on the third Megane. For the fourth generation, this transmission arrived cured of all problems. The clutch of this transmission lasts about 250,000 kilometers and even more. Its price is at least $1,200. The clutch condition can be determined using a diagnostic scanner. You also need to monitor the condition of the left axle shaft seal. A lot of transmission oil can leak through it. By the way, oil for preselective transmissions is used for refilling, about 2 liters. DW5 7-street preselective gearbox. DW6 6-street preselective gearbox. The 1.6 and 1.7-liter turbodiesel and 1.3-liter turbo engine received Getrag preselective transmissions with wet multi-plate clutches. They have been widely used for a long time. 7-street BMW installs the unit on its front-wheel drive models and Mini. If you refresh the oil in these transmissions every 50,000 kilometers, it will last a long time. You also need to upload the latest firmware. Essentially, these transmissions are equivalent to DSGs with wet clutches, which are very durable. If you don't torment them with running on old oil, then they will serve for a long time, more than 300,000 kilometers. Otherwise, you will have to replace the entire transmission assembly. Cases when these preselective gearboxes begin to jerk strongly when changing gears and do not adapt occur already at 150,000 kilometers. Renault Megane 4 its ancestors may require replacement of the clutch master cylinder 306107880R. It begins to leak with age. Periodically look at the clutch pedal. Is the cylinder body dry? The cooling system of the diesel Megane 4 has an electronic thermostat 212009132R, which is connected to the pipes behind the bumper under the left headlight. On 4 to 6-year-old cars, this thermostat fails, and the car complains of problems with the toxicity control system. The diagnostics shows a specific error. This thermostat is not on sale. You have to buy it through friends and acquaintances in Poland or Lithuania. Or you can search at auto wrecking yards. In general, many spare parts that are not in great demand, not consumables, are currently not available for sale, even on order. When operating or purchasing a Megane 4 and other Renaults of the same years, you need to pay attention to the cooling fan. It should not make noise or crunch during rotation or play. Often the fan, namely its bushing, makes noise even at minimum speed when the impeller is pushed by hand. There are not many cases of fan jamming. In any case, it will have to be replaced with a new one. The original 214819674R, 214813939R will cost $600, and a replacement from the supplier to the conveyor will cost $250. A temporary solution to the problem is adding copper grease. It can be stuffed into the bushing on which the bearing rotates through a hole in the fan motor housing covered with an identification sticker. The Megane 4 air conditioning system uses environmentally friendly Freon 1234U. It is very expensive. Refilling can cost $200. You can easily switch to regular and commonly available Freon R134A. The standard one must be completely released before recharging the system. The suspension of the Megane 4 is simple, but the chassis parts of the RS version are all original and sporty. The lower arms in the McPherson suspension are steel, with riveted ball joints. The cost of the original 5450547333R is inhumane, almost $500. Therefore, the silent blocks of the front levers are updated with non-original products, the cost of which does not exceed $20 to $30. The original front stabilizer struts 546182227R are currently unavailable for sale. Replacements cost between $10 and $30. Front stabilizer bushings are not sold separately from the stabilizer itself, 546116493R, but they last a very long time. Under 300,000 kilometers. No replacements have yet been invented. Front wheel bearings 402024Ya1A are inseparable from the hubs, so they are expensive. Original $400, replacements up to $200. The rear brake discs have integrated wheel bearings and ABS rings. Even non-original manufacturers do not offer rear hubs and discs separately. In the original 432029176R, everything together costs about $300. The rear suspension of the Megane 4 is a torsion beam. There are only two silent blocks at the front where the beam is attached to the body. They are not yet available for sale, 550442806R. Optionally, the Megane 4 is equipped with a fully controlled 4-control chassis. In this case, there is also a rear beam at the back. A servo drive is screwed to it in front, which, through two rods, deflects, as it turns, the cams of the rear wheels at small angles. This slight deviation is possible due to the flexibility of the rear steering knuckle silent blocks. Only the version with a 4-control option has silent blocks. And so far the components of this system are serving well. By the way, uncharged Megane 4, even with a 4-control option, are completely normal, i.e. passive shock absorbers. The original ones also disappeared from free sale, but there are a lot of substitutes. The body of the Renault Megane 4 is beautifully painted, and the body metal is well galvanized. On station wagons and hatchbacks, the outer trunk door is made of plastic, literally entirely. Corrosion will not appear on this French car for a very long time. But the trunk doors on these cars, even after a mileage of 150,000 kilometers, seem to sag on their hinges. There is also a version that the plastic lining expands in the heat, and in general such a huge and heavy plastic part is not super rigid, so it bends slightly when slammed shut. Basically, the edges of the tailgate start to touch the bumper and rub off the paint. Purely cosmetic defects appear. Also, on some cars, the back door squeaks if the body sways too much when driving over uneven surfaces. Let's add that the tailgate can be adjusted. Sometimes just twisting the rubber stops is enough. If it doesn't help, then you need to go to specialists or a dealer. Sometimes the trunk door release button simply falls apart in half and falls completely inside. A new original button 906069264R can be purchased for $30. Sometimes the rear window washer does not work on Megane 4s freshly imported from Europe. The problem is that the check valve in the tubes becomes clogged. It is the European windshield washer fluid that clogs it. Some types of it contain sediment that clogs the valve. Of course, cleaning the valve at the tube connection solves the problem. The headlights of the Renault Megane 4 have impressive lights, but after 200,000 kilometers, these lights either begin to shine dimmer, the standard white light turns yellow, or burn out completely. What to do about it? 3 LEDs are responsible for lighting the running lights in each headlight. They shine into so-called waveguides. These are tubes that distribute light. Almost like optical fiber with a transparent jacket. Actually, it is the waveguides that are embedded in the headlights along the line along the hood and are either tiers or sticks that penetrate the bumper. So, DRL modules in the form of a board with 3 LEDs and a huge radiator are sold in China. Apparently there is a demand for them. The prices are very reasonable. The installation is simple: remove the bumper, remove the required headlight, twist the block, put everything back together. Or you can select and buy a suitable LED. They are of two types, 5 and a pair of 10 volts. But you can't just pick them out with a soldering iron. It is better to contact a special workshop. By the way, a burnt-out LED can smoke the end of the waveguide. It should be sanded until clear. On the Megane 4 with keyless entry, this access does not work well when the door handles, primarily the drivers, are dirty. When it is clean it works fine. Therefore, either wipe it, or do not immediately pull it after touching it. They say this also helps to open the door without pressing the buttons on the key. It is very rare that the power windows stop working on the Megane 4, none of them work. No matter what button you press, Renault Megane 4 is equipped with a fairly powerful R-Link multimedia. It has many convenient functions. GPS navigation works well. Navigation is available not only in a rich version with a large vertically oriented screen, but also in a version with a small horizontal display. Craftsmen have already found an approach to it. They download maps, add tips about photo cameras, activate Android Auto, and improve something in the firmware. For example, the city speed limit can be changed from the European 50 km per hour to the usual 60 km per hour. In the early years of release, our Link multimedia was buggy in terms of software, but since software 9.0 has been very stable. The instrument panel may become a victim of mileage distortion. It will independently reset the daily mileage, change the language and color of the design. They say that repairing is useless. You need to buy a used ear panel, untouched by mileage twisters, install it and sew it to your car.